problem scouting, deciding on which problems to solve, and how to name them properly. All right, so now we're going to tackle the problems. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to understand the nature of tier one problems, name and describe the problem properly, and understand how this knowledge helps you shape your future value proposition, and understand how this knowledge helps you shape your future value proposition. Problems are everywhere. It's a simple truth. Look around you. Everything you see, use, and don't use was designed by someone to solve some of your problem. Were those problems the problems you knew existed before you actually were faced with somebody telling you that there is a problem? Well, sometimes not, sometimes yes. Look closer and you will find that many of your problems still remained unsolved. For example, every now and then I cooperate with different companies. And every time those companies ask me to fill in a form so that they can, do a contract with me. Surprisingly, the form is sometimes somehow different. I mean, it contains the same fields, but it's very hard to optimize and, copy paste everything. Sometimes they differ slightly, and that makes my job difficult. Is it fun to fill in the documents? Not at all. Is it a problem that is solved? Maybe. I did not look for the solutions, but it is a problem. It is a problem, and is it worth investigating? Well, let's think. Noticing a problem is a good start. Noticing a problem usually leads to some great innovations. However, not every problem is worth solving, and not every idea is worth pursuing. Noticing a problem, however, is a good start, and investigating the problem is a job one can take. So you can spend some time investigating the problem. Understanding the nature and underlying emotions is a step in the right direction, that's for sure. So if you notice a problem and then you understand the underlying emotion, like, for example, in my case, it would be the discomfort of boredom and doing repetitive tasks over and over again and feeling frustrated with the job that, I'm too good to do, and so on and so forth. So that is understanding the nature and underlying emotion. Assessing the problem is a must. So once you have that problem, once you notice it, once you understand the nature of it, think, is it scalable? Meaning, do I have this problem and others have this problem? And do the others that have the problem, are they a significant group of people? Like in my case, I could definitely investigate that. I could look into the, entrepreneurs. I could look into the other people who are in freelance consultants like I am, and I could follow up with the research. However, I should probably not ask them a direct question, do you have the same problem? Because then they would either say yes or no, and that could not be the right answer. What I would do is probably I would follow up with the observation, and I would just maybe see how they deal with the things that they have to do right now. So is it scalable? Meaning, do others also have the problem? Do they notice the problem? But also, is it a tier one problem? A tier one problem is the problem that makes our life so difficult that it almost makes it impossible to function. In a company, a tier one problem is the one that stops the production, that stops the business. So my problem is definitely not a tier one problem. Had I started losing customers because of not being able to solve that problem, that would have been, a tier one problem because my business runs on customers. So can I make it a tier one problem? Well, in this case, I would probably not try to make it a tier one problem, but sometimes you can actually put forward your problem and present it as a tier one problem, using great framing, so that people can understand that is actually a problem that makes their life difficult. Whenever you are looking into the problem, beware of two biases, however. Once you spot the problem, and start thinking of the solution, you will feel the excitement, because it is so exciting to think about the new ideas. Remember the last time you had a good idea, or you thought you had a good idea, or you thought the idea was good? It felt good, didn't it? Right? You maybe even thought that you were the only one who had that idea. You forgot to check whether others could have had a similar idea. So you just decided to follow up this idea. And maybe you ended up in some dodgy, dark place because this idea was not so great after all. I mean, maybe it did not happen. It happened for me a couple of times. So you will feel the excitement of the new idea. And you will start to treat your idea like your offspring. And that means that you will want your idea to win. Why wouldn't you? It's your idea. And that leads to two biases that affect your future outcomes. So these are motivated reasoning and confirmation bias. Motivated reasoning is a pattern in which you start thinking with a motivation that your idea wins. And confirmation bias is being blind to the counter arguments and only cherry picking the arguments and the proofs that you are right. This can be very dangerous, as you might expect. I mean, optimism is great, but not when it leads to blindness. So when you're validating your ideas, stay objective, and instead of maybe validating your ideas, invalidate them. Think about, why is it a bad idea? Why is it the idea that will lose? And do that each and every step of the way. I mean, I do not want you to become pessimist, but I definitely do want you to win. So beware of those two biases: motivated reasoning, confirmation bias, and also beware of optimism bias, where we are overly optimistic. And when it comes to planning the projects, become aware of the planning fallacy. Those are the biases that are usually messing up with our planning. And now, for the other experiment that proves that it's really important to experiment and not to put too much effort and resources into the idea just because we think it's a great idea. So now for the Dropbox case study. Here's the Dropbox case study that you probably are familiar with. So when the Dropbox started, developing their idea and noticing the problem, there were many file sharing services existed. They were just not so good, or at least the founders of Dropbox thought so. So they had the assumption that people are not very, very, satisfied with the existing solutions. The problem the founders observed were their own, yet they decided to investigate carefully, not to think that this is a problem that is, already scalable. They wanted to find the proof. They thought of the customer. They decided to come up with a persona, Tom the Techie, an early adopter who works on projects that require swapping many files between and shifting network of collaborators. They have investigated the potency of such target group using Google search and other estimations. Then they came up with the problem scenario that it is difficult to share files between a fluid network of collaborators, particularly if they are big, numerous, or change a lot. And that is the reality of a lot of freelance professionals. So they also thought, okay, what other alternatives are there on the market? So they were not shy on really looking for other solutions. Yes, and they found many existing products, but none of them are super compelling, and they were not widely adopted by the community. Also, they required custom setups, which could already be a source of discomfort, so they were not very convenient. What the value proposition was a file sharing service that truly feels transparent to the user across all major platforms. Those were, however, only assumptions. They did not put those assumptions as truths and started working on it. Before that, they tested the assumptions. So those assumptions, including the persona, the problem scenario, and even the value proposition, were good starting point, but just a start. So without experiments and tests, they are neither true or false. All those statements can be true, but they can also be false. And that is why Dropbox did the following. They created an explanatory video, really a, simple mock-up in which they explained how this would work. No code whatsoever. So they did not code the solution. They just created an explanatory video using a mockup. They searched the people to test it out with, so they actually had a landing page with a call to action to subscribe to find out more. And then they gathered insights about people using forums like Reddit and Quora. And they then concluded, based on the evidence, that the idea was good and the problem was scalable. So they had the key assumption: people like Tom exist, and if there was a really nice, easy filing sharing service, they would adopt it. They conducted an experiment, so they had handcrafted a demo. They posted it and oriented the messaging to the early market, promoted it, and they waited to see what happens. They had the validation criteria, so they assumed upfront that they want substantial traffic on the video and signups for the product information. So that was the validation criteria, the key factor. And the result, they had a strong preliminary validation. Don't trust your intuition. Look for the proof. Consider the following. Is it the problems the others have? Is it a tier 1 problem? How can I test my assumption? Those are the questions you should always be asking. In this lessons, I have presented you with the knowledge on the importance of understanding the problem, the difference between a tier 1 problem and other problems, and how to describe problems using the problem scenario.